This is a video that I'm shooting. I'm using Copics, so it is a Copic tutorial, but it's showing how to use your Copics to color in a Scandinavian style with Distress Inks. I had already shot part one, which covered the hair and skin tone, so now we're going to move on to her clothing. And I think clothing is probably the trickiest of all to get colored correctly. If you've looked at Scandinavian style, you'll see that they use a lot of light colors. They do have bursts of dark, but they use very, very pale colors. And Copics are notoriously known for being quite bright and pure of color. So you've got to stick to the lighter tones, and especially the So sticking to the lighter tones, especially the newer Copics, the quadruple zeros make for a good blending, but you want to keep more towards the zeros or the ones when you're using Copics to color like Distress Inks. So, and this is the original one that I had done. So we're going to work on her dress, and for her dress colors I used R20, R00, and R000 along with my W3. So let's get started here. And again, as you know, I always start with my darkest. And for this, we're not using a lot. We're just going in and adding a little bit of this darker pink. Because again, I want this dress to be very light. Part of that Scandinavian style is using a very light watercolor look with the Distress Inks. So of course we're not going to use a lot of the dark. And I'm just flicking up a bit of color where it might be a little bit more shaded. And then there would be a shadow under here. Then I'm going to go use, this is R00, and I'm just kind of flicking up and over what I've already done. Again, keeping everything very light. If you notice in Scandinavian style, there's a lot of almost white color in their watercoloring. So that's important to keep in mind when you're doing this. And then R000, I don't know how many zeros I said, but there's 4 in this one. And I'm just going over what I've done and out just a bit. I'm going to keep quite a bit of white in this. Going back to the R20, I'm going to do this band right here, using the same colors. This is R00, and I'm going to take the quadruple 0R, it's easier for me to say, and then this is where the tricky part comes in, and you want to make sure you do this correctly because it's kind of hard to go back and fix. But 2 colors I've used for this, and I'll show you the finished image again. I'm using my W3, but I'm also adding a new color, and that is E42. And E42 is a grayish cream, and I'm going to bring that right up into some of these folds. It's kind of a distressing vintage creamy brown that I like to use. And notice I didn't use a lot, just a little bit. And again, keeping with the watercolor look where it's always darker around those edges, I'm using my W3, and I'm going back in to add my shadows. And then I'm going to go back in with my R00. I'm just going to blend those edges just a bit more so they're not too harsh. Again, this is R00. Like I said, the R20 that I used, I just used a little bit of. I'm not using a lot of it. And I see a few spots on her skin that I'm actually going to go touch up with my E00. Remembering, with Copics, that's the beauty. You can go back, fix your mistakes. This paper I'm using is a new paper that I found while I was at CHA. It's by Couture Cardstock. I have the link on my blog and also on the info part of this video. I really like it. The ink stays wet a lot longer on the top, so you're able to really move your inks around, and it doesn't bleed through either, as you can see, which is nice. But also, when your image is already dried and you decide to go back and add shadowing or more color to it, it takes to it very, very well. It doesn't crack or make your image look blotchy like some of the cardstocks will if you've let the image dry. I'm just taking the colorless blender and I'm just going to kind of lightly feather over all those edges. And that's how I would do her dress. So let's move down to her little socks here. Again, just a little bit of color. This is the R20 again. Just doing a little bit around these edges. I'm going to take R00, oops, run in, and feeding what I've already done, flicking down and into it just a bit. I'm going to take that E42 again, and just a little bit on these folds. I'm taking my W3 if I can find it. Here we go. And I'm just shadowing those corners and edges a bit. Because when you color with watercolors, a lot of times the ink tends to bleed out lighter and stays darker in those edges. So we want to create that same effect with our Copics. And then I'm going to take my lightest, my R quadruple 0, and I'm just going to go in and feather it just a bit.